Hi, my name is Rachel Kornfield, and I'll be presenting our paper involving crowd workers with lived experience in content development for push-based digital mental health tools, lessons learned from crowdsourcing mental health messages. The problem motivating our work is that our mental health care system is broken. Mental health problems are extremely common. In the US, 20% of Americans each year have a diagnosable mental health condition, but most of those individuals do not receive any care at all. Digital mental health tools like apps, online programs, or automated text messaging programs have potential to dramatically expand the convenience and access to support, but they have not been very engaging to users in real-world settings. We wanted to understand whether peer production methods, specifically crowdsourcing, can help to keep content engaging within these tools. Those who have firsthand lived experience may better understand end users' day-to-day needs and be able to craft messages to better meet these needs in communication styles that those end users will be receptive to. Crowdsourcing methods also allow for scalability and can produce enough content to sustain longer-term engagement with digital mental health tools. Many individuals with mental health conditions are not interested in directly communicating with others, but they may be receptive to peer support that's delivered through automated tools. So our focus here is on push-based automated messaging programs that can integrate crowdsourced content. And these sorts of programs can reach users in their day-to-day lives at different times of day with text messages or notifications, so they can overcome issues with motivation or forgetting to engage with a tool, potentially keeping users engaged for longer. It's important, though, to understand what sorts of messages these end users might be receptive to and what sorts of topics of messages crowd workers would be especially well suited to produce. So I'm going to focus on the first two research questions here. The others are covered in the paper. First, we wanted to understand the types of mental health messages that crowd workers most commonly would compose for push-based automated messaging tools. Second, we were interested in how crowd workers would evaluate messages that were composed by their peers versus those composed by experts. Participants were recruited through Mechanical Turk, and they completed the study activities on Qualtrics. All participants self-identified as having experienced a mental health concern in the past year. In the first wave, 516 crowd workers contributed to content development. First, we had them review expert-composed messages from an existing messaging program, and they gave feedback on those messages as well as editing them. We also asked crowd workers to propose their own message topics and to compose example messages. In the second wave, 309 crowd workers evaluated those same expert-produced messages, as well as crowd worker-produced messages from wave one, and spoke more broadly to their views of automated messaging programs. At the end of wave one, we asked crowd workers about possible message topics or messages that we should include that hadn't been emphasized by experts. So the prompt read in the box below, please write a message on any topic at all that you might like to receive to help you manage stress, anxiety, or depression, or tell us what kinds of messages we should focus on creating. So some responses provided example messages. There were 206 example messages produced. And then other crowd workers gave examples of topics they were interested in. And there were 249 topic suggestions. So we grouped these topic suggestions together into categories. There were about 20 categories. And then we assigned the example messages to each topic. The table here shows the most popular topics as far as the messages produced. And the 6 most popular were novel topics introduced by the crowd workers, meaning that they had not been in the original expert message set. The first 3, reassurance, affirmation, and inspiration, could be considered emotional support messages. They focus on meeting the emotional needs of end users. The next 3, relaxation, self-care, and positive thinking, might be considered self-help strategies. Those bottom 5 were in the original message set, but they were endorsed by crowd workers, or those crowd workers produced messages that aligned with those categories. In wave 2, we focused on evaluating messages in those 11 most popular topics. So we asked crowd workers to rate a set of messages reflecting those 11 topics and content composed both by crowd workers and by experts. They were asked, imagine you signed up for an automated text messaging program to help with mood and mental health. How interested would you be in receiving each of the following text messages, rating them on a Likert scale from 1 to 7? We found that there was no significant difference in the ratings given for expert-composed versus crowd worker-composed messages. There was a trend favoring experts. We also looked at whether there was an interaction between the topic of messages and the ratings and the effect of author type. So what we found here was that experts did have higher ratings in one category, which was behavioral activation, a significant interaction effect. And we looked to some of the specific messages produced by experts and crowd workers to understand what might be going on here. We did notice that crowd workers tended to promote very specific immediate behaviors like go outside or listen to happy music, whereas experts tended to prompt the reader to identify activities that might be personally rewarding. I just want to highlight some conclusions and future directions of this work. First, our data support the idea that crowdsourcing is a viable avenue to rapidly develop content that might be accessible and well received by end users. And we found that they tended to emphasize self-help and emotional support topics. However, expertise may still be important for certain topics, such as positive activities, which may relate to really understanding the therapeutic model behind it. In this case, behavioral activation comes from CBT and relates to the positive activities topic. So experts may have benefited from some training in that area. We think that future work should examine the attribution of content. How would messages be received if they were specifically attributed to peers versus experts? And how should that happen within a messaging program? We may also look at whether crowdsourcing affects crowd workers in positive ways, whether they enjoy and benefit from actually producing content from others, in which case prompts to write content might be built into the interventions themselves. There's an example of that shown on the right hand of the slide. We may also want to understand how content is received, not in a study context, but in the context of users' real lives. How do they receive messages from their peers? And really understand the effects of interventions that include crowdsourced content. So I will end there. Thank you very much for your attention. And please feel free to contact me with any questions about this work.